It's no longer required.
Oh, is that so?
Yes. I planned for the punch of flavor to jog my sleepy mind, but it's this full-bodied explosion that's done the trick. Now I see him clearly. The ultimate fighter waiting to be awoken. His power will keep me suitably entertained. Now the image has a name.
Then by all means, let's hear it.
What was it? It starts with an S, I know that much. A super something, I think. Yes! Super Saiyan God.
A Super Saiyan God? Are you sure?
I think. Or is that wrong? Now I'm forgetting it again. That's the trouble with visions. They're too slippery.
All right then, hold on.
Ooh, you niggas in trouble.
How strong is Dragon Ball GT? Dragon Ball GT, one of the most controversial shows in all of Dragon Ball history, is one of the most debated subjects within the entire fandom, and the power scaling is no different from this. It's really debated on how strong it actually is. Are they Galaxy level and not even Battle of Gods Goku level? Are they on the level of Super? Or are they beyond Outerversal and even stronger than Dragon Ball Super? In this video, I will be giving you guys a full in-depth explanation for how strong Dragon Ball GT actually is, and you will see other creators collabing with me in this video as the video progresses. I will also be comparing the GT power scaling to Super's power scaling so you guys get a full grasp on how strong these guys actually are as a realistic comparison. Without further ado, let's find out how strong Dragon Ball GT actually is. No more bullshit, no more downplay. This is the truth of Dragon Ball GT. To understand the scaling of Dragon Ball GT, the first thing we would have to do is understand what occurs within its timeline, because it's actually commonly debated on what is canon to GT, and the more things that are canon to GT, the stronger Goku is going to be logically, because he would have all of the stats and events from before. So to truly understand GT, we would need to understand what GT is in the first place. GT by Toei Animation is the expansion of the Dragon Ball Z series, and was continued by Akira Toriyama himself, who approved the continuation of GT. This would mean that GT is canon to Dragon Ball Z. However, people will try to argue that it's a side story as a sort of justification, when this is completely invalid, because a side story doesn't necessarily have to mean a separate continuity. Side stories most often refer to subplots that are used to supplement or support the main story. It doesn't really have to be a freaking separate plot. That doesn't make any sense, especially with what is commonly considered a side story. It would be the burden on these people to prove that side story must mean it's a separate timeline or a separate continuity. So yes, it is 100% and absolutely certain that Dragon Ball GT is in fact canon to Dragon Ball Z at the bare minimum. The next topic to go forward on is if the Dragon Ball Z movies are canon to GT. Well, the answer is actually yes and no, because some movies are actually canon and some are not. But how do we know which ones are canon and which ones aren't? Well, it's actually quite simple. The Daizenshuu actually explains that some of these movies just cannot happen and exist entirely in a different timeline or a different dimension, as they say within the guidebook. And the ones that are not labeled as a different dimension would logically be canon. And some of the movies actually do appear on the Daizenshuu timeline board, which would mean that these movies are actually canon. In fact, the Daizenshuu timeline is in context to one universe, which is referring to the main Dragon Ball universe. So if these movies are appearing on the timeline for the main Dragon Ball universe, then some of these movies are canon. Examples of movies that are not canon are some like Broly, Tree of Might, Fusion Reborn, etc., etc. And some movies that are actually canon are the Cooler movies and Garlic Jr., as well as BoJack. Oh, and let's definitely not forget Wrath of the Dragon, which is the most consistent movie of the bunch to appear in GT because Goku knows the Dragon Fist and Videl has her Saiyan Man 2 outfit, which first appeared in the Wrath of the Dragon movie. One thing I almost forgot to mention is that Cooler appears in GT, which justifies the other thing I said about Cooler being in the Daizenshuu timeline just being more consistent, yada yada yada. Also, I don't know why I have to explain Garlic Jr. being canon. I think I'm just doing this to fill out the video, but you know, he has his own filler arc. I think you can let this one slide if you're a down player trying to debug my video as much as possible. Before I get to the next point, one thing I do want to cover about Fusion Reborn is that it is a little ambiguous if it actually is canon to GT. Now, I do know that the Daizenshuu does mention Fusion Reborn being labeled as a different dimension, but perhaps maybe the Dragon Ball staff retconned it being a different dimension in GT, because it's very likely to, you know, put that into question, because we know that Vegeta has the same mistake that he has in Fusion Reborn, as well as the fact that Gogeta has his same outfit, and the fact that, you know, the Dragon Box actually uses a picture of Fusion Reborn in the Transformations timeline to suggest that Fusion Reborn actually happened in GT. Perfect Files 2 also kind of implies that Gogeta in Fusion Reborn is the same one as GT, but it has been interpreted as just media releases before. But to kind of support the other claim is that they have a legit linear arrow, kind of, you know, like slightly implying it, but you can just take it or leave it there. So I guess it would kind of be okay to say that Fusion Reborn did actually happen in Z, retroactively changing that it used to be a separate continuity, but now it's back within the main Dragon Ball Z G's story. Some people will try to argue that the movies cannot happen because of their inconsistencies, but this is just a nirvana fallacy. Just because a story has inconsistencies does not make it not canon, as these stories were legit created and made with the intent to be canon. It's just that there is nothing that actually contradicts them from being canon to the main story. Sure, they can be inconsistent, but it's not an actual true contradiction within the 3 laws of logic. The last argument that people try to make is where Goku in GT says that he only went to hell once as a way to debunk Fusion Reborn or any movie regarding hell as canon, but this argument is really bad because Goku is saying that he fell down once. The other times where he's went to hell are through teleportation or pure speed to actually travel there, which isn't necessarily falling down. And also, even if we were to grant this, right, that this would just mean that Goku forgot the events that were in the past. It doesn't mean those events suddenly stop existing. Like, let's say I say that I only went to my friend's house once, but I went there multiple times. That doesn't mean space and time magically contradict each other and now those other events no longer existed. So this argument is just a load of buns, and you should never use this to try to debunk GT, or you just don't know how logic works. I don't really know why we have to prove the Z movies are canon to make GT stronger when there are statements of Z characters having superiority or relativity to characters from the Z movies, such as Vegito being stated to be stronger than Gogeta in multiple sources. And even if you want to grant that one V-Jump statement that implies that Gogeta would win, that doesn't really matter because the scan also implies the relative with certain conditions if it's a short battle or a long battle. This would mean that all of the feats from Fusion Reborn and weaker movies would apply to Vegito and would apply all the way to Dragon Ball Z going into Dragon Ball GT. In general, the movies being canon doesn't actually do anything at all because the lore of the movies and the explanations that the movies give for certain things are actually canon, as it's stated to explain the unexplained and be quote-unquote what-if events. And finally, the most controversial subject of the movies being canon is Battle of Gods and Resurrection F being canon to GT. Not to be confused with their Dragon Ball Super versions, which will require an entirely different video of me explaining why Dragon Ball Super is canon to GT. The first few points to prove that this is the case is the fact that there are multiple consistent timeline boards placing Battle of Gods and Dragon Ball GT in the same timeline, such as the Chosetsu 4 timeline and the World of Dragon Ball timeline from the 2013 exhibit. Xenoverse 2 dialogue also shows interactions with GT Goku and Beerus, with GT Goku explicitly stating that it has been a while since the last time he has met Beerus. There's even an interview with Toriyama and Nakatsuru where Nakatsuru points out how Dragon Ball GT has already filled out the events of the future, so Toriyama would have to make a story in the past to continue making Dragon Ball content, in which Toriyama actually agrees. This would imply that Dragon Ball GT has already filled up the temporal events of the future. This would have to mean that GT takes place in the same timeline as Battle of Gods. Pretty consistent, right? However, according to Dragon Ball Super fans, this shit is not actually true in any way whatsoever, and there's people who actually believe that Battle of Gods is not canon to GT for the silliest of reasons, which I will go over. Let's get into it. The first reason is quote-unquote Goku doesn't use his god forms in GT, or there is no mention of anything in Battle of Gods or Resurrection F, so therefore they are not canon to GT. But not only is this an argument from silence fallacy, but this is just straight up wrong, because there's actually an in-lore explanation for why Goku doesn't use the god forms, as well as a consistent explanation for why there is no god forms in GT. The in-lore explanation is actually confirmed by the Toei website, which confirms that Goku cannot let out as much power as he wants to, meaning that the most logical and simple reason for why we don't see these god forms is because Goku can't, and at the very end of the Baby Saga is when he's able to regain his full strength. Someone could try to quote-unquote loophole my statement and say, oh, but then why doesn't he use the god forms at that specific point? Oh, I don't know, maybe because the fact that he just gained Super Saiyan 4 not too long after this. As for the consistent explanation, the god forms were not a concept back in 1996 and 1997, but that does not mean that GT is not canon, because the problem with this argument is that it ignores the fact that the timeline actually allows them to even be connected in the first place. The staff don't care about the god forms and their consistency within the timeline. They literally do not care at any way whatsoever. However, as a byproduct of them not knowing that they're going to make new god forms in 2013 and 2014, it's going to create a lot of bad writing elements, such as Vegeta getting one tap by Super 17 when he should have went God or Super Saiyan Blue to actually stand a better chance against him, which he doesn't for some reason now. But this bad writing element isn't new within Dragon Ball media. For example, even inside of Battle of Gods, why didn't Goku use Super Saiyan 3 in space and kept using Super Saiyan, not even Super Saiyan 2, which is just really funny to me. And also in the Dragon Ball Super Broly movie, Broly is threatening the entire Earth and potentially the entire universe. So why doesn't Goku use Kaioken or Vegeta use Super Saiyan Blue Evolution to stand a better chance? And as for the silly Daima fans, I don't even think your story is canon to Dragon Ball Super, but even just assuming that it is, why doesn't Goku go Super Saiyan 4 in Dragon Ball Super? It's quite simple, right? Then then you're starting to notice the problems that this bad writing element of not using forms is pretty consistent. The same arguments also kind of apply with other things like why doesn't Beerus or Whis show up in Dragon Ball GT, but that same argument is like saying because Launch doesn't show up in Dragon Ball Super, then therefore Dragon Ball Super isn't canon. The existence of Beerus or Whis, or just the appearance of them, is not necessary for something to be canon or not. The next argument comes from people saying, oh, but Xenoverse is just a game, so you can't use game statements to justify your claim. But this argument ignores the point for why we do this. Because the thing is, right, games are actually based off of the anime. So if games are based off of the anime, that means that their scaling or logic is going to apply to the games. For example, we know that Vegeta is Goku's rival in the anime, so he's going to be Goku's rival in the games, which is something that you'd at least have to agree with, given how Dragon Ball games even work in the first place. They're based off the anime, dude. So if they're based off the anime, and GT Goku is knowing who Beerus is casually, then there is a parallel relationship within the anime that GT Goku would know Beerus. Skeptics will also try to argue that the timeline connecting GT and Battle of Gods is just a take-place timeline, just showing where the events take place in chronological order. But this argument is also incredibly bad, because the timeline is in context to the main universe of Dragon Ball, given how they say the universe. So it's in context to the main universe of Dragon Ball. Like, I don't know really why I have to explain this to you when the guide literally says it's the story of Dragon Ball. Adding on to this point, people will also then try to argue that the universe is just in context to Dragon Ball as a franchise. But if that were true, why would they only be showing 2 timelines within the Dragon Ball timeline? Which just doesn't make any sense if you listen to their interpretation properly. Then they would have to include other movie timelines, the future Trunks timeline, etc, etc. But they don't appear, making this interpretation invalid, which supports our interpretation being true of Battle of Gods being canon to GT. The only semi-strong argument I saw against Battle of Gods being canon to GT comes from this Toriyama statement saying that Battle of Gods is the continuation of the manga. When Toriyama says my manga, it's just an advanced way of saying my story is continuing, not necessarily that Dragon Ball Battle of Gods is literally within the manga continuity. He's just making the general statement that Dragon Ball in general is continuing with the new Battle of Gods movie. Some other ways we can refute this statement is the fact that Battle of Gods is a Z title, which means it has relation to the anime, because in Dragon Ball in Japan, Dragon Ball Z doesn't exist as a manga. It's just the continuation of Dragon Ball with extra chapters. Dragon Ball Z was strictly an anime only title created in Japan. So the fact that Battle of Gods has the Z title means that it's a story that is in relation with the anime and not the manga. Battle of Gods guidebooks also hold consistency to this. In the Battle of Gods guide, there is actually a timeline called the History of Battles, showing the history of battles building up to Battle of Gods, showing screenshots from the Z anime, proving my point that Battle of Gods is part of the Z anime continuity and not the manga continuity. In fact, there is one Battle of Gods guidebook where when they explain the world of Dragon Ball, or they explain Goku's family tree, etc, etc, they always use anime screenshots to describe categories of Dragon Ball, meaning that Battle of Gods is definitely part of the Z anime continuity. I cannot believe that there are people who genuinely think that an anime exists in the manga. Wow, that's very funny. And to finally put the icing on the cake, when these Battle of Gods guides try to describe where Battle of Gods is taking place, they use anime screenshots to show where it takes place. So this evidence is very concrete that Battle of Gods takes place within the anime timeline and not the manga timeline, dear God. And since Resurrection F is the direct continuation of the Battle of Gods movie, this would mean that Resurrection F is canon to GT by proxy. Now that I've explained the canon of Dragon Ball GT, we're going to move on to the next point, which is going to be talking about the scaling of Dragon Ball GT. All of the feats, statements, etc. that power scale Dragon Ball GT will now be described in this segment of the video. Before I continue with the scaling portion, this video was sponsored by Noblesse. Join discord.gg/Noblesse. You can find the link in the description below. And it's an anime server, it's an anime community server, yada yada yada. It's very fun. If you want to talk with my audience or talk with other people, just chill at Noblesse, join in the description, and please help out. We are almost at 1,000 members in Noblesse, and it would really be a huge contribution to you guys if you just joined up. It's just one click, very simple. Before we even touch Dragon Ball GT, we need to establish that End of Z Goku is the pinnacle of power in Dragon Ball Z. Yes, he is beyond literally everyone, every character, every villain, every fusion in Dragon Ball Z. He is beyond all of those things. Goku is the strongest in Dragon Ball Z. This is the case because the Son Goku Densetsu calls him the strongest and Toriyama calls him the strongest. This would mean that he is stronger than characters like Frieza, who can threaten to destroy the entire infinite universe in Dragon Ball, as well as blow up entire galaxies while being heavily suppressed after the explosion of planet Namek. Stronger than Garlic Jr., who can create an entire hyperspace with his ki, possibly an infinite dimensional super space with the potential of quantum mechanics existing in Dragon Ball. Stronger than Perfect Cell, who has an infinite power level, and stronger than Gotenks, who can casually warp entire realities by just existing. Far beyond Buhan, who destroyed the dimensional walls of the entire Outerversal Universe 7 macrocosm. Stronger than the concept of evil himself, Janemba, who threatened to destroy the entire afterlife and the universe. And stronger than Kid Buu, who is responsible for the absorption of multiple gods that oversee the entire macrocosm. And finally, stronger than the fusion that was thought to be the strongest character in Dragon Ball Z, Vegito. I did make a video covering the topic on why End of Z Goku beats Vegito, so if you want to see something in depth with that, just go watch that video. And funnily enough, the El Manga Legendario calls End of Z Goku the strongest, which is also a guide that includes Arale as a character in the Dragon Ball universe, so Goku would also be above Arale as well. The same Arale that is so strong that she can conceptually transcend her entire cosmology and oversee it as fiction, can mess around with the author aka Toribot, casually travel to the future with just her pure speed alone, and just many, and I mean many, gag level, author level feats that are beyond conventional power scaling. And don't take my statement out of context, not every strongest statement means that your character is above Arale, just this specific one, because most of the strongest statements are only in context to Dragon Ball exclusive characters. Arale is so OP that characters from Dragon Ball Super are struggling to beat her, like a post Goku Black Arc Super Saiyan Blue Goku. But meanwhile, this End of Z Goku is stronger than Arale, which logically means that End of Z Goku, not even GT Goku, is sweeping through most of Dragon Ball Super. And before anyone starts coping in the comments and says, oh, well then that just means Arale got stronger. No, she didn't, because Goku said it himself. So yeah, it's really that crazy. GT scaling is really that broken, and we haven't even got into GT yet, and they're already beating most of Super with just a base form End of Z Goku. Oh, and I almost forgot to mention, he's also retroactively above Movie Beerus now, since Movie Beerus is now added into Z, which also means that he is above the super dimensional power of Beerus. Overall, End of Z Goku would scale to high hyperversal to outer versal with a measurable to irrelevant speed. Now let's finally dive into Dragon Ball GT. In episode 1 of GT, Goku leaves Dende's hyperbolic time chamber-like place after a full power battle up against Oob. This statement that Goku makes can be interpreted in many different ways, such as A, he's using his full power with the inclusion of his maximum form, or B, he's just using his base form's full power. In my opinion, I think the first interpretation is a better interpretation to go with, because in the first episode of GT, all we really saw was the conclusion of their fight. We never actually saw the fight begin. So maybe off screen, Goku could have used other forms without the audience actually watching it happen. This interpretation can be supported given the fact that when full power is used, it's usually in context to the most extreme way of a user's full power. For example, when Goku says that he's going to use his full power against Majin Vegeta, he's in context talking about his greatest form that we see, which is Super Saiyan 2. Technically, Goku was lying here, but in the audience perspective, they genuinely believed that Super Saiyan 2 was his full power because that was the maximum transformation Goku had at that point that the audience knew of, before Super Saiyan 3 came out later in the manga. This is what was labeled as Goku's full power. Someone could try to refute my point by saying that Goku did say that he was using 100% of his strength with Oob in the World Martial Arts Tournament and was only using his base form, but Vegeta actually refutes this point by saying that neither him, Goku, or Oob could use the best of his abilities in a place like this. And my final point for why I think Goku was using his maximum transformation against Oob is that Dende mistakes Goku's fight with Oob as a quote-unquote graduation ceremony. We know that Goku was trying to train Oob ever since the beginning of End of Z, so wouldn't it be more logical if Oob completed his training by fighting his master who's actually using his full power to his very limits? Yeah, that's what I usually would think, right? Not necessarily a base full power. This would mean that at a very great low ball, Super Saiyan 3 Goku is equal to Oob, and if you want to use the mid ball interpretation, which is the one I usually agree with, then Super Saiyan Blue GT Goku is equal to Oob. We also need to account the fact that Goku trained 5 years after the end of Z, and in Dragon Ball we know that training boosts are incredibly huge for a character's power level, such as the Saiyan Saga, Namek Saga, Cell Saga, and the Buu Saga. Every training amp that Goku has experienced has majorly increased his power level. So how does this affect GT? Well, we can use basic inductive reasoning and math. We know that after every training boost per different arcs, we know that Goku has a greater training boost than the last. Let me use the lowest mathematical example. So we know that Goku after the death of Raditz had only a power level of 416, but after he came back from King Kai's training for 6 months, he gained a power level of 8,000. This would mean that he got hundreds of times stronger within the span of 6 months. Oh, and by the way, this training method is completely inferior to Goku in Dragon Ball Z by the very end. Now let's look at better training methods that Goku uses after the Saiyan Saga. Goku trains for 6 days during the arrival to Namek, and he grows from a power level of 8,000 to 90,000 after he lands. Keep in mind, this happened in 6 days. If we use that math and convert it into 6 months, he would actually have a power level of 600,000. When you compare the two training boosts side by side, you end up realizing that the Saiyan Saga boost is only 19 times when the Namek Saga boost is 750 times. This is a massive improvement from the previous training arc, significantly amping Goku's training gains by large numbers. Goku then gets a training boost that is so great in the Buu Saga, where after he trains for 7 years in the other world, his training boost was so great that it was on par with a Cell Saga fusion multiplier. This is the case because Goten and Trunks are relative in power with each other, and Goten is stated to be equal to a Cell Games Goku. Then afterwards, it's confirmed that Gotenks only got stronger than Goku and Vegeta after he trained in the Hyperbolic Time Chamber. This would also imply that Super Saiyan 2 Goku and Super Saiyan 2 Vegeta were stronger than Gotenks during their fight before Majin Buu's awakening. So using the inductive reasoning and consistency, this would mean that GT Goku's training boost is at least beyond a Cell Saga multiplier of a fusion. And if you guys want to compare that to realistic numbers, that's actually over billions. Yeah, that already says enough, bro. You pack it up. GT Goku solos, bro. After the whole incident with Oob, the Pilaf gang come to Kami's tower and wish to turn Goku back into a child. I think you know the usual filler bits, yada yada yada, let's just get to the good stuff.
Have you ever played block fruits with your life on the line while having a bunch of mangoes in your mouth? Well, this is called dark mango psychology.
One thing that we need to establish is the fact that Dragon Ball GT villains immediately surpass any single possible Z villain, because what is stated by the writers is that Goku was too strong to have enemies on Earth. So the concept of Goku going outside of Earth was necessary because of Goku being too strong, meaning that the fact that characters like Buuhan or Kid Buu exist on Earth is like not enough for Goku in terms of the writing. They needed to make Goku have fights outside of the Earth. This would at least mean that the first major GT warrior surpasses any single villain in Z, and that first warrior is Legend, who is basically the Dragon Ball GT version of him. He was strong enough to go toe-to-toe with base Goku, but then when Goku goes Super Saiyan, he would eventually outclass Legend, and then the story continues from there. Later on throughout the adventure, Goku finds out what celebrities do backstage in real life, and then Lord Luud is unleashed, who is allegedly labeled as the quote-unquote God of Destruction. Yeah, he is definitely not the God of Destruction. But what is crazy is that the God of Destruction of Universe 3 does look a lot like Lord Luud, so maybe they're in the same race or something. Luud's followers confirm that Lord Luud has the power to destroy the universe, which is extremely ironic because the fanbase of Dragon Ball has been thinking that GT is only galaxy level for years, so I find it really ironic that the first arc of GT immediately debunks one of the most common power scaling misconceptions about GT. And for any of the weirdos that are just saying it's an overtime feat, first of all, that's inconsistent with how destruction works in Dragon Ball. When they mention things like destroy the planet, they literally mean it in terms of a one shot. Destroy the galaxy, one shot, etc, etc. To say it's just over time doesn't make sense with how consistency of destruction happens in Dragon Ball. And like I previously mentioned, the Dragon Ball universe is infinite, so to destroy an infinite universe would require infinite speed. Yeah, so anyway, don't use these incredibly disingenuous and bad arguments that completely ignore the Dragon Ball narrative as a whole. Luud ends up getting jumped by Goku and Trunks with a 2v1 with them both in Super Saiyan, which implies that Luud is at least relative to a Super Saiyan Goku or a Super Saiyan Trunks. Either way, it doesn't matter. They're both relative base to base within their fight against Luud. This is further supported when Luud powers up to a third form that is even stronger than the second form that needed to be 2v1'd. Goku would then fight the Sigma Force, who are stated to be the greatest power that Goku has seen so far, making the Sigma Force above Luud's maximum form, which is relative to Goku's Super Saiyan form. Goku would beat these guys up in his base form, which would mean that Goku is now above Luud in his base form, which is also now making him above Super Saiyan in his base form. Post-edit note, I do not know why they named them the Sigma Force, because oh my goodness, that did not age well at all. After the fight with the Sigma Force, Goku would then reach General Rildo and make one of the most controversial statements in all of GT history, being that General Rildo has power beyond Majin Buu. Fans always wonder on which version of Buu Goku refers to when talking about General Rildo, and there are many logical points from both sides about Kid Buu, Fat Buu, or even Buuhan, but for this video I will be logically deducing which version of Buu Goku is most likely referring to when discussing with General Rildo. The first competitor to eliminate from this statement is obviously Fat Buu. Yes, I know that Fat Buu is the only version of Buu that is currently existing within GT, and the fact that when they commonly refer to Majin Buu, they're always talking about Fat Buu unless specific given context. However, this information is completely insignificant because even in the Buu Saga, Goku has made statements about Fat Buu not really being that much of a strong guy. This is evident when Goku says that he could have beat Fat Buu at any time in Super Saiyan 3, but decided not to so the kids could prepare for the next generation, giving them the responsibility to take down Fat Buu. If Goku is forcing the burden on children to go fight Fat Buu instead of himself, it really says something about how Goku views Fat Buu, because he does not view him as anything special, which is completely the opposite of how he was treating Buu compared to General Rildo, comparing both of their power. And as previously established, all of these villains surpassed anyone in Z, so it would not make any sense for Goku to be referring to Fat Buu given the context of how he views him and the narrative and studio explanations for how power works in GT. This is also further supported by the source material because even Trunks said that General Rildo's ki was impossibly huge. Now this doesn't literally mean that General Rildo's ki is impossible, but this translates to the idea that General Rildo's ki is beyond anything that Trunks has perceived before, which includes Kid Buu. Even before Goku made his statement about Rildo being the strongest strongest Buu. He compliments Rildo and says that to think that he would ever see a ki as large as his, which supports that he is beyond Kid Buu, who is the strongest Buu. And for my last point, every Dragon Ball villain is typically hyped up to be stronger than the last when it comes to main villains and crap like that. So General Rildo being compared to Buu would actually most likely be comparing to Kid Buu, because this is consistent. Frieza was a top tier, Trunks defeated him, then the androids were there, the androids are nothing to Cell is equal to Dabura was outclassed by Buu. It's just consistency. General Rildo is the next big bad, and now he's beyond Buu, which was the previous peak power tier in Dragon Ball Z. Please turn your brain on GT downplayers. This completely ignores the story if you're saying he's only being compared to Fat Buu. And lastly, the icing on the cake is that Goku trained with Kid Buu for 5 years. We have to remember that Kid Buu is Oob, so he trained with that same Kid Buu for long periods of time. It makes absolutely no sense for him to be comparing Rildo to an absolutely fodder character that means nothing to him after he got billions of times stronger through training. And for anyone who claims that it's Buuhan, there's absolutely no evidence to prove this is the case, and also Buuhan is not even the strongest Buu, so he should not even be put into comparison with General Rildo. And for any of those Buuhan fans watching that are disagreeing, just go watch my friend Historic's video. He's one of the people collabing with me for this video, and I really recommend you checking out this video because the intent and execution remains clear that Historic proves that Kid Buu is stronger than Buuhan. There are some little pieces of information I disagree with, but it's still very good, and I highly recommend it for anyone who wants to get the whole Buuhan versus Kid Buu debate cleared up. There's actually more emphasis on General Rildo's power than just this, and a lot of Dragon Ball GT power scalers don't actually know about the truth of General Rildo, so I'll just address what is missed out about his power right here. Pay attention to what Goku says right here. He says, to think I should ever come across a ki as large as yours. This pretty much suggests the idea that General Rildo has a ki quantity that is so large that it is greater than anything Goku has seen before. This suggests the idea that General Rildo isn't just beyond Buu, but is beyond everything that Goku has faced prior, which includes Oob, the same Oob that I explained earlier that rivaled Super Saiyan 3 adult GT Goku. Yes, I know the statement isn't fully concrete, but there is a ton of consistency behind it to prove that this is the case for General Rildo being above everyone else. For starters, remember the Sigma Force that I mentioned earlier? That same Sigma Force would also be above Oob using Goku's statement, and General Rildo is even stronger than that. Massively stronger than that according to Goku as well. And Goku is able to contend with this with only half of his power in base form. By the way, this implies that Kid Goku, without fully unlocking his ki control, surpassed his adult self in his base form. His adult Super Saiyan Blue is weaker than his base form with half of his power. Yeah, we definitely lost the plot. Oh my god, GT Goku absolutely slaps. Rildo then transforms into Hyper Meta Rildo after absorbing the Sigma Force and then goes toe-to-toe with Super Saiyan Goku. Then he turns into Silver Surfer, and pretty much Goku is no match for this version of Rildo. He is later defeated though, and then is revealed to be controlled by Baby.
His first all? Motherfucker!
Yes, the best arc in GT, the Baby Saga. One of the best things about the Baby arc in terms of scaling is that we already get a great point for the Baby arc to make the characters stronger than they usually are. This is evident with Baby himself because of how his power works in the first place. Baby is a parasite that absorbs other people to gain an advantage during fighting. The only way he can absorb you is if he's relative in power to you or if he's stronger than you. This is evident because Baby attempts to absorb Trunks but fails to do so after he turns into a Super Saiyan and forces Baby out of him. However, much earlier, Baby is shown that he has been capable of absorbing people like base Rildo. This would logically conclude that Super Saiyan Trunks is stronger than base Rildo. Goku almost kills Baby with a Kamehameha in base, which, you know, is pretty obvious considering that Baby is not really that strong compared to somebody like base Goku, who was massively above base Rildo. This also could kind of suggest the idea that maybe Super Saiyan Trunks is equal to base Goku, but you can take it or leave it. Later throughout the arc, Baby runs the fade with Goten. Despite not training, Goten is stated to have strength that is alive and well, meaning that him slacking off on his training did absolutely nothing to his power. It's stating that his strength is alive and well could suggest that it could have gotten stronger naturally, but who knows. Goten, while he's fighting Baby, states that his dad would not have lost to him at all. Some people may start opening up in the comments saying that, oh my god, Zeta, your chain scale is debunked because Goten said so. But this actually ignores the context completely, because this same Baby was actually holding back before he let out his full power to beat Goten. He actually was holding back to make Goten go to his full power. More so that he was just waiting for the right time. Baby, when possessing Goten, confirms that Gohan is stronger than Goten. But by the way, I just want to clear something up. Gohan did not train 15 years like the Perfect Fall says so, as the GT interviews completely debunk this idea from being the case, so please do not use this argument. Gohan and Goten try to jump Vegeta, but Vegeta manages to overpower both of them. By the way, while this is going on, Vegeta doesn't even activate Super Saiyan 2, and he's beating the crap out of both Gohan and Goten. One thing I forgot to mention about Goten is the fact that Baby needed to power up into another form in order to match him, because his original Baby form, like his small form, would not be sufficient enough to match Goten's power, suggesting that Goten is above the likes of base Rildo, you know who, yada yada yada, same tier of Trunks. Further consistency to this type of scaling is also supported given that after Baby becomes Vegeta, he then makes the statement that he is the strongest body in the entire universe. Some people might put my chain scale into question as to how it's true because Perfect Files 1 does state that Goku is the strongest in the universe, but then we have my scale basically saying that Goten is stronger than Baby, who is stronger than Oob, who is equal to Goku's maximum form. Well, this scale can be easily explained because this statement could have just been made about the beginning of GT Goku, and these characters would eventually get stronger or obtain Zenkai's other external things. After all, it did state that Goten's power was alive and well. This kind of logic can apply to characters like Vegeta and Gohan as well. Goku arrives back to Earth but gets his ass beat by Super Baby even while having Super Saiyan 3. Baby powers up beyond this and becomes Super Baby 1. He claims that he is the strongest of Saiyan power, in which Goku also agrees, claiming that he is the greatest ki he has ever felt before. Yes, this concretely makes it clear that Super Baby 1 is beyond literally everything before in the history of Dragon Ball. Gogeta, Vegeta, you name it. And if you believe that Beerus and Whis exist in the history of GT, Super Baby 1 would be beating their ass too. Baby then taps into the Super Saiyan 3 lookalike according to the Perfect Files, labeled as Super Baby 2. Goku before stood absolutely no chance against Super Baby 1, so with Super Baby 2, Goku is absolutely cooked in this situation. Mind you, Super Baby was on some evil Super Saiyan God type shit, absorbing multiple different Saiyans. This pretty much implies that Super Baby 1 is far beyond a form like Super Saiyan 2, most likely speaking. Especially the case when you look at other Dragon Ball medias made by Toei, like for example, when Goku is given the energy by other Saiyans to defeat Broly, it is actually a 1000 times ape. To put some more respect on Super Baby 1's power, we need to go backtrack to a previous statement I explained in the video where Baby states that he has the greatest of Saiyan power. I want you to pay attention to this statement, because Saiyan power would also imply the boosts of Saiyan transformations or techniques. This is very similar language as to, let's say, this is the greatest form of military power. This would mean that Super Baby 2 is beyond even forms like Super Saiyan God and Super Saiyan Blue. But if you just want to appeal to lowballs, this would just mean that Super Baby 2 is beyond the Patara boost of Goku and Vegeta back in the Buu Saga. Going back to Super Baby 2, Super Baby 2 unleashes his Revenge Death Ball, which has the power to erase you from existence, which means that GT had Hakai before Hakai even came out. Just before Goku's about to die, Kabito Kai comes to save him and instant transmissions Goku out of Earth. While Goku's inside of instant transmission, he is then flinged by Baby's Revenge Death Ball out of Kabito Kai's hands and is sent to the Sugoroku Space. There are a lot of cosmological interpretations to digest about the Sugoroku Space, so to make things easier, I will let my boy Electron X cover it for you guys so you guys get the truth about the Dragon Ball GT cosmology and the Sugoroku Space.
A very notable realm referenced in the Chozenshu guidebook was stated to be a subspace that is not bounded to any world shown in figure number 1, which also means consequently it's not limited to any world in figure number 1. And figure number 1 shows the entirety of the macrocosm, which consists of Otherworld, the Living Realm, and the Kao Shin realm. And additionally, it was stated that within this realm, the concepts like time and space do not exist, and is suspended in a dimension detached from any area, implying that there's no change that occurs within this realm. And additionally, it states that it has been confirmed that there are realms like this, such as the realm of spirit and time in the Sugoroku Space. And I want to clarify some things. When they refer to this realm as a dimension, that's not to denote literally that it has space and time or some dimensional axes, but they just use that colloquially to mean like a realm. And for the very skeptic people out there, this source of information comes from the Chozenshu, and the Chozenshu is literally the composed Daizenshu for information regarding how the Dragon Ball cosmology is structured, and Toriyama verbatim implied that he uses the Daizenshu as a valid source of information when writing Dragon Ball in case he forgets things about the verse and what's what within the cosmology. And we also have priors from the anime that supports this, specifically from Dragon Ball GT, where it states that though the Sugoroku Space is an area between time and space where no one from the outside can help you, and implying that it's an area between time and space. And there's other realms such as the Instant Transmission realm, which was stated to transcend time. So overall, the subspace is just blatantly fucking out-versal, and for the Sugoroku Space, you can also make similar arguments as well.
To support Tron's point, the Sugoroku Space houses these space tanukis which lived there for an incredibly long time. However, after they left the Sugoroku Space, they actually died after the 100-year time skip, implying that these beings were not immortal and that they were held in the Sugoroku Space for eternity and they could not escape because they don't age. We see similar scenarios such as the Otherworld, which is blatantly stated multiple times to lack time, and characters within the Otherworld do not age. So yes, there is previous consistency that entails that the Sugoroku Space lacks time and space. There's even more evidence to suggest that the subspace Sugoroku Space scaling is higher dimensional outer-versal even after GT ended. This is shown in the Dragon Ball Super Broly movie and explained through the Dragon Ball Super Broly light novel. It pretty much explains that Broly and Gogeta broke the boundaries between dimensions. And as we can see in the movie, after they break the boundaries between dimensions, they are taken to this dimension. These statements are similar or pretty much exact to the ones from Dragon Ball GT. So it pretty much suggests that the space that Gogeta and Broly went to is the same subspace that is discussed about within the Chozenshu. And given how they make similar statements, it would be pretty expected if they are the exact same same dimension. And to put the icing on the cake, it literally says that Gogeta and Broly have power beyond space and time, so this is just very cut and clear for outerversal, and extreme consistency within the narrative about the subspace's transcendent nature to space and time. I also want to make some add-ons about the instant transmission space in Dragon Ball GT. In Xenoverse, it's actually confirmed that the instant transmission space exists outside of all timelines, and this is evident when Goku uses instant transmission and is taken to the crack of time, meaning every character in Dragon Ball Z, Dragon Ball Super, and Dragon Ball GT have the ability to cross timelines by using instant transmission at its true potential. Really goes to show how they needed time machines in order to limit the plot. Crazy enough how the instant transmission technique is actually one of the only very few methods of traveling to the other world. I did explain very earlier ago in the video that the other world is outerversal, but I did it very briefly. But basically speaking, right, if the instant transmission can travel to the other world, that would imply that the instant transmission technique has an outerversal range at bare minimum. This realm is actually one of the greatest cosmological structures within Dragon Ball history, because just using a bare minimum, it would be fifth dimensional. Using a mid vault, it would be outerversal with the other world, and for a high vault, it would be beyond all timelines as proven with Xenoverse. Cosmology aside, let's actually talk about how these GT characters even scaled to these structures in the first place. For the instant transmission space, Baby's Revenge Death Ball has shockwaves that are so powerful that it can shake the entire instant transmission space and send Goku to the Sugoroku Space. We know that he affected the entire space because his Revenge Death Ball actually reality warped the entire space, and this is visibly shown with the sky of the instant transmission space appearing as pink. But after Baby uses his Revenge Death Ball, it goes into a darker tint and goes into like a whole like red, murky, shifty kind of color. This isn't the only instance of this happening in Dragon Ball. For example, Topps Hakai reality warps the entire world of Void, making it have a cosmic appearance, changing its color, that sort of thing. It's not new. So if you want to discredit Baby's ability as reality warping, then you'd have to disregard Topps as well. Downplayers love using this goofy argument that the shockwaves only affected Kibito Kai and Goku and not the instant transmission zone. But this argument is incredibly goofy and flawed, because not only did I refute that earlier in this video, but even if we steel man and grant that, it's gonna cause problems. This is the case because we know that in Dragon Ball, increasing speed equals increasing strength. So the fact that the speed of his ki can reach an outerversal realm very fast would imply that he would be able to affect or destroy it within a same or similar magnitude. And as for the Sugoroku Space, Goku literally blows it up with a Kamehameha in base. People will try to use the argument that Goku was doing something similar to Gotenks and simply breaking through the dimension to escape, but this argument is true and false at the same time. Yes, he was busting through the dimension in order to escape, but if you actually pay attention and use some watching comprehension when watching your own show, you'd realize that the destruction of Goku's Kamehameha was spreading, and this is literally how destruction works. It destroyed the entire space, and then Goku managed to escape. There is nothing that even concretely proves that Goku simply made a hole and then left. There's literally no evidence for that. If that were the case, the Kamehameha would have likely made a space hole, and then Goku and the Tanukis would have entered that, similar to Gotenks and how he uses dimension busting to escape locations. But no, the destruction literally spreads out and whitens up the entire Sugoroku space, and then we just see Goku within the middle of nowhere. So not only is that inconsistent with dimension escaping in the past, but there's just no evidence for this being the case. The next argument is quote-unquote Goku is already destroying an already destroyed dimension, so Goku doesn't scale to the Sugoroku space. But this argument is extremely terrible because the whole point of the Shinigami was that the game was going to be destroyed due to Goku cheating. The dimension would have to stay intact in order for Goku to keep wandering in between dimensions forever, because that's what the Sugoroku space is. It's an area between dimensions. This was the exact punishment the Shinigami wanted to give Goku and the Space Tanukis after cheating. However, if Goku destroys that said dimension, then he wouldn't have to go through the punishment of wandering in between dimensions forever, because that dimension would no longer even exist. These two feats from Dragon Ball GT are some of the greatest feats in Dragon Ball history, and they are seriously overlooked, especially with the Battle of Gods macrocosm feat, which I actually think is worse than these two. But anyways, let's move on to what happens after Goku leaves the Sugoroku space. Goku would arrive to the Kaioshin realm to get his potential unleashed in order to defeat Baby. However, the process is a little bit goofy, and they end up using some pliers to yank out Goku's tail in order to unleash his potential. After this event, it's implied that when Goku re-obtained his tail, he lost all of his limitations that he received during the Child Wish, and this is evident because in his fight against Baby, the rematch, not to be confused with the first fight, Goku is shown being able to use Super Saiyan 3 far better than he did before in their first fight, which would mean that Goku no longer has to experience the stamina loss that he had before. In fact, after Goku regained his tail, Perfect Files 1 pretty much confirms it and says that Goku has obtained his original Saiyan power. All of Goku's previous limitations are now removed, which includes Goku's ability ability to have shitty ki control, and now that he has better ki control, he can now output that ki control and make sure to do better damage in fights, yada yada yada. Our Goku is back. Sadly though, even after getting Goku's potential unleashed, the result remains the exact same. So much similar to the point where Baby literally believed that Goku did not get stronger at all. Meaning even with greater ki control, the power output was so insignificant according to Baby that he literally did not even believe Goku got stronger, which really just goes to show that Baby is absolutely broken. As all hope seems lost, Goku is pushed to the brink and is heavily fatigued, heavily injured, and is on his last breath. But he looks at the earth, finally unlocking his dormant potential. And now Goku has finally became the Golden Great Ape, which is actually confirmed by the Perfect Files to be the legendary Super Saiyan. Yeah, you thought that this was the legendary Super Saiyan? Hell no, this is the legendary Super Saiyan. Golden Great Ape Goku starts cooking Baby so hard to the point where he gets PTSD of the Saiyans attacking his race. He deadass realizes that he has no chance against Golden Great Ape Goku. On top of this, Pan is able to reason with Goku to stop him from doing his primal instincts, which would convert Goku into Super Saiyan 4. Super Saiyan 4 is a transformation that is distinct from all other Super Saiyans. It's not part of the Super Saiyan branch of 1, 2, and 3 at all. It's completely disconnected. It allows the user to tap into their utmost limits, which basically implies that when Goku goes Super Saiyan 4, he pretty much achieves what his power would look like at his physical peak. Of course, this gets surpassed later, but in terms of the Baby arc, his physical peak was this. On top of this, Super Saiyan 4 also has the ability to pretty much have Maharaga absolute adaptation, because once an attack lands on Goku, it doesn't work again. Don't confuse this with Goku predicting attacks or having some sort of like counteracting to them, because I'm talking about Super Saiyan 4's durability here. If you hit Super Saiyan 4 with a technique and you try doing that again, it will not work. This is evident when Ice Shenron froze Goku, and when he tried to do that again, well, look what happens. However, this ability likely doesn't work if an ability is way too complex. For example, if Omega Shenron tries to punch Goku, it obviously wouldn't adapt very well because he is so far beyond Goku that it wouldn't be able to not work against him. So I don't want anyone in my comments trying to tell other people that this ability makes Goku like omnipotent, invincible or something, because this ability does actually have limits. It would only work if Goku far outclassed an enemy or had the edge against them in power. Some other perks of Super Saiyan 4 includes the fact that it has the best stamina out of any form in any piece of Dragon Ball media, because when Super Saiyan 4 was knocked out, it never went back into his base form. Literally, he was knocked out and he just remains in Super Saiyan 4. Super Saiyan 4 also has the ability to absorb attacks, which means that he can get stronger by just absorbing the things around him. Technically, he did absorb Baby's Revenge Death Ball, which maybe could imply that Goku could erase beings from existence all the way in GT. But I don't know, I'm kind of just like naming all of Goku's abilities in Super Saiyan 4. Super Saiyan 4 is the controlled version of the Golden Uzaru, so logically speaking, they wouldn't actually be all that different in terms of multiplier, and this is also evident with Baby matching Goku's power when he becomes a Golden Great Ape. This now raises the question as to what is the multiplier of Super Saiyan 4. Down players will immediately try to bring up the whole 500 times because
Oh, it's Uzaru with Super Saiyan.
But this argument is extremely bad, because if it was 500 times, it wouldn't even be able to match Baby's first form. No, seriously, Daizenshuu says that you have to at least be 2 times stronger than the opponent in order to completely outclass them, and Baby actually does this in his Super Saiyan form, so meaning that Baby in Super Saiyan is at least 2 times stronger than Super Saiyan 3 Goku. Baby would also further up power beyond this twice, which means that Golden Uzaru, if it actually is 500 times, would be so astronomically fodder, but we know that's not true because it absolutely destroyed Super Baby 2. Okay, well, Super Saiyan 3 plus Uzaru, well, that multiplier isn't true either, because there's multiple statements of Super Saiyan 4 being on the level of a fusion in terms of multiplier. As one of the staff for GT confirms that he already thought that fusion was absolutely insane, so when Super Saiyan 4 was introduced, he actually went crazy and thought it was insane to continue power even further, which kind of implies that Super Saiyan 4 is beyond the Buu Saga Patara boost. People will try to use this scan from the GT anime comics to basically say that Super Saiyan Vegito is on the level of Super Saiyan 4 Goku from the Baby arc, but not only is this a terrible interpretation of the scan, but it's just blatantly wrong if that's what the scan actually says. For one, the scan is not even mentioning Goku or Vegeta or the legendary Super Saiyan from thousands of years ago that became a Super Saiyan 4. So it's most likely comparing the Patara boost of the Buu Saga to Super Saiyan 4 Goku's multiplier in the Baby arc. Even if we grant that it's a character comparison or a multiplier comparison, it doesn't really matter, because comparing things doesn't actually entail anything or entail that they're relative in power or anything like that. I could compare the power of a fly and the power of a tiger, but it wouldn't necessarily mean anything. So this scan is really just a giant nothing burger. And for anyone who genuinely thinks that Z Vegito is stronger than Super Saiyan 4 Goku, that is just blatantly not true and is contradicted by the story multiple times. Let's just use a chain scale that contradicts this idea from being true. For one, Buhan is equal to base Vegito, Kid Buu is stronger than Buhan, Kid Buu is implied to be equal to the power of Oob, Oob is equal to base End of Z Goku. This would mean that End of Z Goku is at least 2 times stronger than base Vegito, which would mean that his Super Saiyan 3 would be greater than Vegito's Super Saiyan 3. And then we have Super Saiyan 4 plus the, 15 years of training in the time skip. People will also try to argue that Goku's conversation with Super Baby 1 doesn't include Vegito's full power because Goku has never felt the full power of Vegito, but this argument is really bad because Saiyans like Goku have already felt unactivated power before. So if they can feel unactivated power, it makes no sense to claim that Goku magically can't do that because he's in a fusion body, even though it literally shares his mind. There's also the fact that the Spirit Bomb, which is confirmed to be the maximum level of power in Dragon Ball Z, is stronger than Super Saiyan 3 Vegito. So even if he never felt Vegito's full power, he would have felt the power of the Spirit Bomb, which is stronger than Super Saiyan 3 Vegito. And what's funny is that you can debunk all of these 3 multipliers just by using the extra canon proving Battle of Gods and Resurrection F are canon to GT. Because the GT guidebooks and GT Goku's word himself basically just say that Super Saiyan 4 is the ultimate transformation that Goku has in his arsenal. And if you want to be that guy that only uses source material for GT to scale GT, you don't even have to use these whole Battle of Gods Resurrection F scaling to debunk all of these multipliers because they're all wrong if you really pay attention to the source material. This is because when Goku went to the Kaoshin realm, Elder Kai confirmed that the only way to possibly beat Baby is to unlock Goku's hidden potential. And regardless of how that potential is outputted, we know that the potential being unleashed is the Golden Great Ape, which didn't just prove that it was possible, but it was outright destroying Baby. This would actually mean that a hypothetical Super Saiyan 3 Goku Oob fusion with the Potara would not be enough to take down Baby. Now, before anyone starts playing skeptic and starts saying, oh, what if Elder Kai wasn't considering that, there's actually a lot of evidence that likely points to this being the case. For one, it would make absolutely no sense to not account for fusion when discussing on possibilities to defeat Baby because Elder Kai is one of the main people for fusion. In fact, this goes on to my second point where he was the one that introduced the concept of using the Potara to defeat other enemies within the Buu Saga, which supports it being the case that it would be very implausible for fusion not to be accounted for. 3, it would make no narrative sense for there to be other possibilities to beat Baby because that would defeat the significance of Super Saiyan 4. If there were other ways of beating Baby, why not just use that? Goku literally asked Elder Kai to leave the Kaioshin realm. Plus, it would just get rid of the stakes and tensions of Dragon Ball GT if there was a fusion that would defeat Baby. And it would be far easier and faster for Goku to beat Baby instead of going through the incredible extreme pain of getting his tail pulled out. And 4, Elder Kai is watching Oob fight, which means that there are 2 hosts, making it open for a Potara fusion to be possible. Even Perfect Files 1 makes it clear that in order to beat Baby, Goku must undergo the training of Elder Kai, which was to unlock his potential. So it actually does line up with Elder Kai's statement. And one honorable mention is the fact that when Goku was brutally beaten down by Baby, he even said that not even a hypothetical Super Saiyan 3 Gotenks plus everyone ganging up on him would even stand a silver chance, which pretty much supports of this whole Super Saiyan 4's beyond GT fusion tier characters. One terrible argument to debunk Super Saiyan 4 being beyond fusion is the fact that Elder Kai or Kabito Kai are not seen wearing Potara earrings, so therefore there's no Potara earrings to give Goku to do a fusion. However, this argument gets completely invalidated after understanding what the Kais are capable of creating in the first place. They can create giant boxes, planets, stars, the entire fucking universe, etc., which are things that are way more bigger and complex than just a little tiny set of earrings. In fact, we literally see in Daima and Battle of Gods and Dragon Ball Super as a whole with them being able to wear these earrings, so it's not impossible for them to get their earrings casually by just creating a new set of earrings. It would just be extremely unlikely that they wouldn't be able to create a very small set of earrings. I've also been seeing people use Majub as a sort of debunk to this argument because Majub was relative to Super Baby 2, so therefore a fusion would be able to one-shot him, but this ignores the time placement on when the statement was made. When Elder Kai claimed the only way to beat Baby was to unlock Goku's potential, he made this statement before Oob powered up into Majub. So Majub having sub-relative power to Super Baby 2 would just be an indicator that Majub got a fusion level amp to match Baby. And for anyone who's really skeptical, yes, Elder Kai can feel the hidden potential of users, so him making a comparison in power would actually hold a lot of reliability. This is because Old Kai is able to know when to stop when drawing out the potential of people. We also know that the process takes more time the more potential someone has, so Old Kai by necessity of the process needs to know how much potential his target has. This is also supported by the fact that Elder Guru is also able to sense the dormant power of Krillin, so it's very consistent for these types of characters to be able to accurately tell the hidden power of other characters. So at the end of the day, Super Baby 2 would at least be 2 times the power of a Super Saiyan 3 Goku Oob fusion, and Goku in Super Saiyan 4 absolutely beat the dog shit out of that same Super Baby 2, so logically this would mean that Super Saiyan 4 is around 4 times or even greater the amount of a Super Saiyan 3 Goku Oob fusion in terms of multiplier. So yeah, Super Saiyan 4 is beyond fusion level. And just before I continue the rest of the Baby Saga scaling, there is another honorable mention I'd like to mention about Super Saiyan 4. When Goku was knocked out and Baby was knocked out, it's confirmed by Elder Kai that Kibito does not have the power to restore Super Saiyan 4. However, in the Dragon Ball Super manga, it's confirmed by Supreme Kai that Trunks has enough power to only heal a Super Saiyan Blue level being in the Goku Black arc. But Zeta, wait, why is this important? It's important because in the Dragon Ball Super anime and the Dragon Ball Super manga, Trunks in his power scaling is actually very vastly different in both continuities. In the anime version, he is actually on the level of the gods, but in the manga, he's not even stronger than Kibito Kai, and yes, I'm being serious. People will immediately jump to the refutes and try to say that Trunks rivals Super Saiyan 3 Goku in Dragon Ball Super, so therefore he's stronger than Kibito Kai. However, this argument is actually extremely problematic because it ignores the full context. Goku is actually holding back against Trunks. Well, how do we know this? We know this because base Goku Black absolutely dominated full power Trunks. Okay, so does that mean that base Goku Black is stronger than Super Saiyan 3 Goku? Well, this is actually false because Super Saiyan Vegeta is actually relative to Super Saiyan Goku Black before Goku Black got his heal. And at the beginning of the arc, we see that base Goku and base Vegeta are fairly relative during their sparring match. So overall, we can conclude that Super Saiyan Goku is relative to Super Saiyan Goku Black, who is far stronger than full power Trunks, which would lead to an objective contradiction if Super Saiyan 3 Goku is relative to full power Trunks, which we know isn't true and could only be true if Super Saiyan 3 Goku is holding back. So therefore, all of this would mean that Super Saiyan 4 Goku from the Baby arc is superior to any Super Saiyan Blue level being in the Goku Black arc for the Dragon Ball Super manga. Also, by the way, I just want to point out, you can be vastly weaker than someone and still be able to restore their power or heal them. So this feat of Trunks healing does not actually upscale him in any way and still puts him below Kibito Kai, who cannot restore Super Saiyan 4 Goku. So with all of this established, Super Saiyan 4 is just casually stronger than gods. Anyway, let's just continue the rest of the baby scaling.
Nobody can beat me when I'm Super 17. Nobody can beat me when I'm Super 17.
Thank my Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ, that I barely have to explain anything for this arc. Anyway, let's just get into it, bro. Like, I'm almost done with this, bro. I'm finally gonna stop editing this. Super 17 is made after the two doctors band up together and create a mysterious, mischievous plan to get revenge on Goku and the gang. I think you know how this goes. Super 17 has the power to fuse the living world with the other world, making it a low multiversal feat, far higher with the implications of higher dimensional scaling and outer versal scaling. And no, this is not in reference to people coming back from the dead or a portal connecting the living world to the other world. No, this is genuinely not true, and this is very easily debunkable. This is because after the portal closed, there were still statements being made of the living world and the other world fusing together, becoming one, as well as the dead returning to life. Even as far as to the last episode of GT, where Shenron states that the living world and other world have become one. And for some additional context, he also makes the distinction of the dead returning to life separated from the other world and the living world fusing, so that's definitely not what they mean by the other world and the living world fusing. This pretty much implies that the boundaries of the other world and the living world were altered and shifted completely. It's almost like they actually fused together. Yeah, I'm sorry, skeptics, it's over, it's cooked. And just to further debunk the whole portals point, the villains literally said that they could go back to Earth after the portal closed, which means that the portal was just not really a relevant thing to them. Super 17 starts boxing all of the Z fighters, and which to no one's surprise, they all get whooped. But here's the crazy part. They actually believe that base Gohan's Kamehameha, quote unquote, got Super 17 and eliminated him. But that was not true. In fact, Super 17 shrugged that shit off. But since they believe that base Gohan's Kamehameha, quote unquote, beat 17, that low-key implies that base Gohan is stronger than Majub, who has a fusion level amp when he fused with Boo. So base Gohan is above fusion level. Wow. Goku arrives, here comes the Goku Glaze. Now, how strong did Goku get after the baby arc? Well, there's this really weird scaling theory that basically says that Goku Super Saiyan got 8 times stronger because Oob was not damaging suppressed Super 17, but Super Saiyan Goku was, and Oob is stronger than Super Saiyan 3 Goku. So it's only 8 times? Well, this is actually incredibly incorrect because this same Super 17 survived Super Saiyan Goku's Kamehameha and took absolutely no damage. But Zeta, why is this relevant? This is relevant because he found it absolutely crazy for someone to survive his Kamehameha as a Super Saiyan and take no damage. But wait, he's seen people survive his Kamehameha as a Super Saiyan 4, so why even be surprised at this? It's really simple. It's an implication that Goku got stronger in between those arcs and found it absolutely insane for someone to survive his Kamehameha as a Super Saiyan, pretty much indicating that Super Saiyan Goku from the Super 17 arc is stronger than Super Saiyan 4 Goku from the baby arc. Goku in the same arc also has a feat of shaking hell, which could potentially be far higher given the implications of King Yama saying that this is out of his hands now, which could be implying that the other world's fate or his responsibility, it's all out of his hands now because of Goku's power and the others. And one last thing before I conclude this arc, Goku using the Dragon Fist does not mean that base Goku surpassed Super 17, as it's very obviously implied that Super 17 was off guard, so this doesn't count, and Goku did not just surpass his entire arsenal in base. That is such fan theory headcanon. Goku and the gang basically messed up. After all of the wishes they made with the Dragon Balls, the negative energy started to overflow, and now they can no longer use them, which now brings birth to the evil Shadow Dragons. The universe is going to be destroyed if they don't stop them. The Shadow Dragon scaling is kind of wonky, so I'll try my best to explain the best I can, because the Shadow Dragon scaling is kind of overlooked and makes Super Saiyan 4 Goku far stronger than it initially was. For starters, let's just ignore Shenron for a moment, because he's actually pretty weak, but he has a very good ability, which will be very important in a minute. Then we have Shenron, who managed to completely deflect Super Saiyan 4 Goku's ×10 Kamehameha, so he pretty much outscales Super Saiyan 4 Goku. One thing I forgot to mention is that he managed to outscale Super Saiyan 4 Goku when he became building levels tall. At the end of the episode, he actually grows into a mountain level height, which could imply that he surpassed Super Saiyan 4 multiple times over. However, it is a kind of questionable variable metric, so it could just be a non sequitur. There's also this implication made by the GT episode previews that could suggest that Oceanus Shenron is beyond the last two dragons, which is pretty important when you consider that Shenron is beyond Super Saiyan 4 Goku, yet Oceanus Shenron is actually below base Goku. So base Goku's low-key slapping up Super Saiyan 4 again, man. I'm telling you, these jumps, like, bro, Rev, do something! Natron Shenron is shown and stated multiple times to be beyond all the previous Shadow Dragons before him. Then we have Nova Shenron, who is said to be stronger than all of the previous Shadow Dragons. And by the way, keep in mind that this statement was made while Nova is in his base form. Goku is then shown sub-relativity to Nova Shenron's base form, so that makes base Goku beyond his Super Saiyan 4 form from before. Shenron shows up and freezes Goku, and Shenron is shown to be visibly stronger than Nova Shenron. And after Goku gets out of the ice, he's confident that he could be Shenron in 5 seconds, which low-key implies that Goku got a Zenkai inside of the ice. This is further evident because prior he was relative to Nova Shenron, so realistically Shenron should be easily beating Goku. But no, that's not true because Shenron literally loses in like 5 seconds. Finally, we have Sin Shenron, who absolutely bodied Super Saiyan 4 Goku and tanked his 10 times Kamehameha in the face. The Kamehameha as a base is already 2 to 3 times your regular strength. So overall, the 10 times Kamehameha is about 24 to 96 times the Kamehameha, which is 48 to 192 times full power Super Saiyan 4. And using Daizenchu's statement, Sin tanked this, so therefore he's 96 to 384 times full power Super Saiyan 4. And Sin would later power up into Omega, which is a 10 times boost from his original power. So now he would be 960 to 3840 times full power Super Saiyan 4. Goku would obtain ultra full power Super Saiyan 4, which would mean that this multiplier would apply to ultra full power Super Saiyan 4. So yeah, Goku is pretty broken in this new form of his.
So it's come to my attention that now I have to step up to the plate and give another debunk to some of this absurd GT downplay. So let's knock it out the frame. Enter Omega Shenron. Omega Shenron had so much power that he was literally able and stated to wipe out the entirety of the universe by just casually existing. This is confirmed multiple times, stated multiple times by the same person as a reiteration of confirmation. Now, there are certain people that will try to downplay this feat and openly lie about it to try to make it seem worse or lower than it actually scales. The first bad argument is that the term universe is used differently in context to different shows. Like, for example, the original Dragon Ball Z anime and manga use universe to refer back to the living world. However, in Super, it's used to refer to the entirety of the macrocosm. I would implore you to actually go back and read the Daizenshus, the guidebooks for the Dragon Ball manga and anime and movies and things of that nature. Those guidebooks were created by Akira Toriyama's staff, who Akira Toriyama himself sees as more credible than he. And in those Daizenshus, it's openly confirmed that universe refers back to the overall totality of the world, as made clear by the multiple entries that talk about the universe in retrospect to the entirety of the macrocosm. For example, Buhan's Vice Shout or outside world ability. His ability is literally stated to cover and wipe out the entirety of the living world and the universe. For those that still don't understand, the universe in retrospect to the mortal world is already covered by the term the living world. For those that don't understand, the living world is literally stated to house the mortal universe that all the humans live in. So it would be openly redundant to say the living world and the universe if it's referring to the exact same things. So yes, even as far back as the original run of the manga, the universe is in retrospect to the entirety of the macrocosm. Even with characters like Kid Buu, this is proven to be true. Kid Buu was literally stated to be a threat to the entire universe, and that includes the Kaioshin realm, which transcends the entirety of the macrocosm conceptually. So no, universe is in retrospect to the macrocosm, especially in this case. Because when you actually look at Elder Kai's explanation for how the Omega Shenron feat was gonna go, he explains how the energy was gonna transfer all the way into the Kaioshin realm directly. And Kibito Kai was so terrified at how fast this thing was gonna happen that he was begging Elder Kai for both of them to literally pack up and clear house immediately. So it's pretty safe to say that this is gonna happen in a very fast and quick amount of time, which also literally helps me attack another argument that a lot of people love to use. People keep saying that it's a chain reaction or something that happens over time, and like I mentioned before, it happens in a very fast amount of time to where Kibito Kai wants to pack up and literally leave immediately. But also what's worse was the fact that that was in retrospect to a blast that Omega Shenron had condensed and combined into a ki blast that was going to be shot out at Gogeta and then blow up the earth. Upon the destruction of the earth, it would then quite literally splatter out and go as an area of effect and literally destroy the macrocosm as a remainder of energy. That is way more impressive than Omega Shenron literally concentrating a blast and then firing it at the macrocosm and blowing it up. Keep in mind, in one, that is the full power and concentrated energy of an attack, and in the other, it's the remainder energy of area of effect. And they're both gonna achieve the exact same thing.
Adding on to Historic's point, we know that the macrocosm literally resembles what everything used to be back in Dragon Ball Z, before the 12 universes, before anything else. All we knew was that there was one universe, and it was the macrocosm of Dragon Ball Z. This is important because Goku states multiple times that Buhan is going to destroy not just the universe, but all of existence. Everything he knows will be destroyed by Buhan. This would make sense if the context of universe was referring to the actual macrocosm in contrast to that of only the living world, because if it was only the living world, it wouldn't be everything that Goku knows of, supporting and raising the probability that the Vaishalt was going to destroy not just a living world, but the entire macrocosm, with these dimensions existing outside of the macrocosm clashing into the macrocosm. Even if we grant to the GT down players that the Omega Shenron feat isn't that strong, it doesn't matter because characters could destroy the entire macrocosm since the Majin Buu arc. And before I go into the other examples, even the English dub agrees with my interpretation that the universe is in context to all of existence in Dragon Ball Z, which is the macrocosm. Let's take a look at Exhibit A, Goku. We know that Goku shook the entire macrocosm in his fight against Fat Buu, so that's already a low multiversal feat and potentially far higher with the you-know-what. And in Fusion Reborn, Goku shakes and reality warps the entire dimensionally transcending afterlife just by screaming. And even if you don't agree that the afterlife is a higher dimensional space, you'd actually at least have to account for the fact that the afterlife is a multiverse because it includes the extra dimensional space, which is a separate realm, also stated to be universal in size. So Goku shaking the afterlife and reality warping it would have to at least be a low multiversal feat. Let's take a look at Exhibit B, Janemba. Even Fat Janemba was so strong that he was stated to have completely changed the afterlife in the movie 12 manga. Powering up into his Super Janemba form, his fight with Super Saiyan 3 Goku was stated to put the Otherworld at stake, which means that he was going to destroy the Otherworld very, very quickly, given the implications that he can just casually shake and reality warp it incredibly damn quickly, so it would make no sense for him to struggle at destroying the afterlife. One example I want to point out as an honorable mention is Gogeta, who created a cosmic explosion that was so vast that it completely dwarfed the entire afterlife and reality warped it after the bomb went away. And by the way, this explosion was created just by Goku and Vegeta fusing. The afterlife is a completely irrelevant structure to these characters and they could easily destroy it. Like this thing, it's on its knees. The afterlife is literally on life support. Then we have Exhibit C, Kid Buu. Kid Buu was so strong that he was easily tearing apart and destroying the entire Kaioshin realm, and the Kaioshin realm is 1/10 the combined size of the living world and the otherworld. Since we know that the otherworld is a higher dimensional place, and potentially outer versal most likely, this would mean that the Kaioshin realm is outer versal 5D by proxy. You don't even have to argue the afterlife transcends dimensions for the Kaioshin realm to be an impressive feat. The reason why is because the living world and the otherworld are two infinitely separated space-time continuums. The macrocosm includes the otherworld and the living world, so logically speaking, there needs to be a higher spatial axes that are separating these two infinite-sized places, and that would also be part of the macrocosm, because if it wasn't, then the macrocosm wouldn't be able to contain more than two realms. This interpretation for a higher spatial axis is also further supported by the Daizenshu, where it's stated that the Kaioshin realm revolves around the circumference for the living and the otherworld. Since both of these worlds are infinite and separated spatio-temporally, the only way they can have a shared orbital boundary is if there's a higher dimensional spatial perspective from which both can be enclosed. The macrocosm includes the circumference of the macrocosm, and the Kaioshin realm is 1/10 of that, so therefore the Kaioshin realm at bare minimum is a 5th dimensional construct, and 6th dimensional if you argue the afterlife is a higher dimensional place, and outer versal if you know you're that guy. TLDR, Kid Buu can destroy something on the same cardinality as the macrocosm, so therefore he can destroy the macrocosm. And before I conclude this whole macrocosm Z rambling session, I just want to backtrack to Buhan to refute a certain argument that people have been making in the community. There's this argument going around that Buhan's feat is a quote-unquote chain reaction. While yes, destroying the macrocosm would be a chain reaction, it ignores the point for why Buhan is so strong. You see, the problem with their argument is that it has to do with a lot of ignorance, because the impressive feat isn't destroying the macrocosm, it's destroying the dimensional wall. You see, the dimensional wall actually separates alternate dimensions from the macrocosm, and if that said thing is destroyed, then therefore, everything is cooked. But the fact that the macrocosm and the dimensions are being separated by a dimensional wall, that would mean that this dimensional wall is so strong that it can separate these two things from colliding with each other, and if destroyed, they will immediately start colliding with each other and fusing together. So being able to destroy something as impressive as the dimensional wall would imply that you have an equal or greater force than destroying the macrocosm. To put it simply, the chain reaction is irrelevant, but destroying the dimensional wall is the relevance. Anyways, back to GT, Vegeta becomes a Super Saiyan 4, and him teaming up with Goku does absolutely nothing against Omega Shenron. They are then forced to become the strongest character in Dragon Ball GT and become a base Kaba yeah, that was actually corny as shit. Never make a joke like that again. The Dragon Ball community needs to grow up from making corny ass jokes. He absolutely obliterates Omega Shenron's macrocosm, destroying Ki Blast, and sends it all the way into outer space, and we have no idea where that thing is anymore. In less than 10 minutes, Super Saiyan 4 Gogeta was so powerful that they defused early, and now they're even more cooked because they can't refuse again, and they're actually very weakened. But don't worry, what's stronger than a fusion? Oh right, becoming a god. Yeah, GT Goku's a god now, having a cloaked aura that prevents any attack from getting near him, being implied to be a Taoism ascension to a higher plane of existence, so this dude is basically Buddha now. Omega Shenron's energy blasts do no damage, and he powers up the greatest attack in Dragon Ball GT and instantly one-shots him with that spirit bomb, and then he leaves with Shenron to go to the world of the gods, so this dude basically watches over the entire Dragon Ball cosmology. He also has the ability, as shown in the 100-year special, to completely violate the rules of the Dragon Balls and bring back people from the dead who died of natural causes. Yeah, I'm not gonna lie, for any of the people who claim that GT Goku was just a ghost, doesn't understand that a ghost doesn't just do that. That's literally pure divinity. I mean, they literally said he was going to the world of the gods. Even Goku Jr. called this man God. I'm not going to really get into the metaphysics or kind of religion behind this whole thing, so if you really want to get some more in-depth on that, go read Dragon Ball Culture Volume 2 by Derek Padula, who I'm pretty sure is a guy that was autographed by the Japanese voice actor of Goku, so if you really want to see a lot of stuff about that, just go check it out over there. It's even implied that Goku, after the 100-year time skip, can still go Super Saiyan 4 even without a tail, further supporting that he is beyond the limits of pretty much anything that was before. And for all of those weird Super Saiyan 4 Gogeta wankers trying to prove he's beyond 100-year time skip Goku, that is just straight up false, because their arguments come from the Perfect Files, which is the same book that also claims that 100-year time skip Goku is the strongest fighter within the final pages of the book. Yes, unlike these weird wankers, I actually have the book, and I translated many pages of it. And no, I don't have the Chinese version or the Portuguese version, I have the actual raw Japanese version of the Perfect Files 1 and 2. From being a little baby, surviving multiple threats on Mount Paozu, to becoming an immortal divine god who transcends all previous fighters and people who can destroy the entire cosmos, Goku has come a long way. And this is the trip of 90s Dragon Ball. Goku really has become that strong, and the 90s tells a great story progressing Goku's power as the story goes. And I really recommend you guys, if you really want to, you should rewatch GT, or, just stand back and watch more of my videos, I guess. But that's kind of all I have to do for this video. I'm really happy that you guys made it all the way through, if you did and didn't just skip your way all the way here. And I'll see you guys later. See ya.